All right, we're going to head over to the studio in the sky where Warren Martin from Kansas Strong and myself didn't even have any chit chat before. We've got a truncated edition for what many of you expect for like the 60-minute long interviews that we try to do. Warren, I've been trying to get them down to 30 minutes these days, and they end up being about 40. And, baby steps, baby steps. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Hey, how's life going in Kansas? I know this is getting to be your busy season in terms of. I always remember March Madness seems to be when you're speaking, gigs really seem to pick up for some reason. You would think it would start, later, like in the oil and gas world, for example. Right around May, June is when the starter pistol kind of goes off for a lot of events. Just as far as like 3 to 6 months of just solid, and then you get a little bit of a break. But you start in March, don't you?
Yeah, most of my presentations are to schools or to social clubs. We have a pretty consistent schedule of industry events that happen all year round. But when the busy season really hits, it's because we're adding a whole bunch of new schools. I've been in a number of schools. I go to a school tomorrow. I go to another school later this week. I go to another two more schools next week. So we add those schools, and this is a prime time for that because they've kind of gotten through their content for the most part for the year, and now they can start building in visitors to come in and present to their students about jobs and about careers and expand upon things that they taught in the classroom. So this is a really busy time for schools. It's also a busy time for social clubs. A lot of social clubs tend to take off during the summer because a lot of people are traveling with their kids and everything else. So they kind of close up shop during the summer. And so this is a busy time for social clubs to kind of get in there before the summer months hit. So this really is our busy season. On top of that, we're building out a new ad campaign and getting it prepared to launch that will run the pretty much the rest of this year. We're real excited about. And so, yeah, it's a busy time. And then you got all of the sports sponsorships that we do. This is a busy season for sports sponsorships. Basketball has a tremendous number of events, and because you got men's and women's that are taking place. So it basically doubles any other sponsorship opportunities that we have throughout the rest of the year.
How is it? How is it with those larger captive audiences? Like whether it's a high school or a college game, they're in the stands, and it's a good opportunity, obviously, to expose the brand, but the message is a whole different ball game. Compared to like a state fair where it's a traditional, almost like trade show booth, and people come up to you. And boy, we both got head colds going today. I'm noticing as we got a little bit of the nasal voice going. I've got my Prince Minnesota Prince hoodie on here because I've got the doors open so I can kind of get some spring cleaning out here. We got a day above 30 degrees. Sorry, Warren. I just my mind was going off a little bit. I noticed you had a little bit of a head cold when you were speaking.
Yeah.
And as I'm speaking, I'm noticing these things too. But juxtaposition a little bit, like the state fair, which is 100,000 people in a couple days going by you, and more one-on-one time, really, versus, Kansas State or the Jayhawks game, or even a high school game where you've got 1,000 people trying to capture their attention, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we're very different than most other advertising agencies and most advertising. Product advertising, you're looking for branding by getting your logo up, a stagnant logo somewhere where people identify with the brand. So you go to a K-State or KU game or WSU game and you see a brand for Nike. That there's no messaging that goes on with that. It's just a brand. Um, and then they do, their messaging through commercials. 30-second, 1 minute commercials. That's where they do all of their messaging. We're a little bit different in the fact that we do our messaging through those 30-second to 2 minute blocks that we get at different opportunities. So like I was just at the Kansas State University game, while I did have a 3 minute halftime interview, we don't really see that as a messaging opportunity as much as a branding opportunity. And our job there is to raise questions, to make statements that will challenge the status quo of what people think about the oil and gas industry, in the hopes that they'll then go to our website and look up more information, get more of the message. And then our messaging opportunity is going to schools, going to these clubs, going to events where we have a 15 to hour long presentation where we get to really explain the oil and gas industry, what we do, how we do it, why it's important to you, why it matters to the world. So ours is a little bit different than normal advertising in that these sponsorships, we see those as branding opportunities. And because not as many people know the brand of Kansas Strong as know Nike, we have to brand in such a way that we explain what the brand is in those moments. So when I was at K-State, one of the questions that I always had them ask is, what does oil and gas have to do with basketball? And I go through, well, oil and gas is responsible for the game of basketball. It goes into the floor, it goes into the varnish that's on the floor, it goes into the backboards, to the basketball, to the or the shoes that they wear, to the uniforms they wear. All the safety equipment that they have on is literally a part of every aspect of this game. If you want to find out more, go to kansasstrong.com. And we consider that a branding opportunity because we didn't really explain how, but if they go to Kansas Strong, if they're intrigued by that, then we get the messaging opportunity. And so that's kind of how we look at those.
It's different too because those are additional opportunities for the world of social media now,
Mhm.
and annual reports and all those different opportunities that you get to showcase that. Because I've said this for a long time that I really believe the oil and gas industry as a whole dropped the ball on connecting with the end user, the entire population, because 98%, 97% of the things we use on a regular basis, are part of the petroleum products, the supply chain. But
Yeah.
even more so, 60 to 70% of your city's grid is for emergency management and hotel or hospitals.
Mhm.
And so the connection is real. And so sponsoring these different bowl games and being a part of these uh, big sporting events, to me, those are extremely important. And now with social media, it shows that you can connect with them afterwards.
Yeah.
Now, you're a smaller organization, so you don't have your own paparazzi. But if somebody happened to record what you did last weekend, well, you can put that out next week now. You can put it out in a month. You can take photos from that. And as long as you put Kansas State basketball, you're going to connect with every single person that has to do with Kansas State basketball. Maybe is it the Big 8, Big
Big
12
12.
group, Big 12?
Big
Boy,
12.
Big 8. Is that even a thing anymore?
I don't
I
think so.
I think that went away back in 19 Dickety too. Yeah, boy, that's something else. Big 8. Boy, that's a whew. Anyway, I was thinking of Big East basketball the other day when I saw St. John's logo, and I reminisced. I went, man, Big East basketball used to be a thing. Now it's just, nothing. At any rate, it's been a while since I've done sports talk, Warren. So I'm going back a little bit, back and forth here. You got to keep
Well,
up, right? Go ahead.
you hit on 2 points there that I think are really important. We do exactly what you're saying. The radio interview that we do at halftime interview is recorded. Then they take pictures while we're doing it. We mesh the pictures with the audio, launch that on social media, and throw that around a few different places on social media. That gives us a link that goes right directly back to our website. We get more we get more feedback, we get more interaction, engagement from the social media post of the halftime interview. But the halftime interview gives us that platform that says, oh, if this happened at halftime of a K-State or KU game, then maybe I should pay attention. It's something that is worthwhile if it happened there. And so it gives us that clout and with that audience that likes the school that we're at that point in time. So yes, that is absolutely one of the components. The other thing I'll go back to is I'm going to correct you a little bit. You were really, really close. There is a new study that came out in October of 2025 that actually showed that 96% is the number. 96% of the average American, 96% of the objects that they're going to touch today are dependent upon petroleum for their manufacture in some way. 96%. And that is a core feature of our current campaign that's called Glitch. And it's kind of like a technical glitch. We all know what a technical glitch is. And so we're bringing that in and showing how without oil and natural gas, your home life, your work life, and your school life would all experience a glitch because there's 96% of the products that you're going to touch today that are dependent upon oil and natural gas. And without oil and natural gas, those things wouldn't be available. Those things would not be there, and there would be a real glitch. And the whole conversation that we're having through those commercials is that energy is more than, oil and natural gas is more than energy. And that's what we're trying to drive home. It's more than energy from the standpoint of it's the only resource that also produces other products that make life better. And it also produces jobs, economic impact, taxes, infrastructure builds within your state. So it's way more than energy. And we're trying to get people to look at oil and natural gas as something beyond the price of the pump, which is all you're going to hear about this entire week as the Iran war is taking place and oil has jumped $10 a barrel and gas prices are going to follow and start going up. And all you're going to hear about is gas prices, but it impacts every aspect of our life.
I do think that oil and gas is going to see a positive PR uptick in the next year, mostly because they got nowhere to go but up. It's been a tough decade since Greta Thunberg decided that she was going to take on the oil and gas world. And quite honestly, Warren, I mean, I've used this example too, that if I'm the best climatologist in the world and I get usurped by a 16-year-old girl at a UN conference on climatology, I'm going to be a little upset, but he's not. I don't understand how she became the spokesperson for climate science, but I think that is going to erode away enough to where now with data centers and with what you're talking about, 96% of what we touch on a regular basis comes or manufactured via the oil and gas supply chain. And you can talk about wind and solar and these alternative energies, but so much of that is reliant on the oil and gas industry, whether it be from the manufacturing to the creation to the distribution of these, to setting them up. So I mean, it's I go a lot of different directions on it, Warren, but I do think there's going to be a positive uptick, and getting people back to just complaining about gas prices is a good start, I think, because when I grew up, that's all the oil and gas industry had a bad name for, was the Exxon Valdez oil spill from like the 90s or the 80s, and then gas prices. That was it. I mean, it wasn't like it was today. But anyway, your thoughts on what I was just saying?
Yeah, I think that you hit on a really good point. I don't think the climatologist is upset about Greta upstaging them as a climatologist because she's not a spokesman for a climatologist. She is a spokesman for the media about the climate. That's a very different thing. The media has been key in setting her up as a spokesperson for the public view of the climate, not the climatologist view of the public. And I think that's a huge, very important distinction. And I think it goes towards pointing out why I think you're right that we're going to see a more positive outlook on oil and gas going through this year, because you have a lot of people that the media has set up as spokespeople for climate. One of those being Bill Gates. And even recently, a few months ago, Bill Gates came out with an article where he stepped back from his view on climate. With the onset of cryptocurrency, of data centers, and especially AI coming on, the world is really waking up to the fact that we're going to need more energy than we can produce at this point in time. And so you can't get rid of oil and gas in any way, shape, or form. In fact, you have to ramp it up to be able to meet the future needs that we're going to have for energy. And so, Bill Gates, he even stepped back and said, we need to look at a more important metric than temperature and emissions, and that is improving lives. And you're seeing that across the board, where you're seeing these high level tech experts that are understanding what I've been saying for years, that we are headed towards an energy crisis. They're seeing it now because it's coming on much faster with AI than we expected. And they're stepping back and saying, whoa, 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 we don't need to be pulling anything offline, because if we do that, we're going to plunge societies into poverty. And that's the absolute worst thing that could happen for the environment. And so there's a more important metric than the temperature and the amount of emissions that we put out. And that is, how do we improve people's lives, pull people out of poverty? Because when people are living outside of poverty, then they have the capability to adapt to and to impact the environment in a positive way. And that's more important than a lot of the efforts that they've been focused on for 30 years.
All right, before I forget, what is the name of the artist with the painting behind you? In my mind, I always think it's a Terry Redlin with the hunting dog and the looks like pheasants, but it's probably
Yeah,
ducks.
it's quail.
Quail. Okay, what's the name of the artist? Because it's not Terry Redlin. I know that, and that's how I remember that it's not Terry Redlin, by reminding myself it's not Terry Redlin. So, who's the name of the artist?
It's Gamble. Is his
Gam-
last name? Gamble. Yep.
Gamble. Okay, and everybody else is going, okay, what's going on
Yep.
now? So,
And
I'm big fan of dogs, and that's a great
yeah,
painting behind Warren Martin there.
yeah.
So,
Interesting story. He actually was an artist that was renowned in this area. My grandmother took art lessons from him, and then she taught me how to utilize her skills and improve my skills as an artist. And I actually got to go to one of his workshops when I was probably 13 years old to learn watercoloring techniques. Everything he does is watercolor.
and are those paintings, portraits, still available to purchase at a museum or anything?
At the prints,
Yeah.
I have not looked that up in a long time. I
Okay.
actually got this one from my grandmother, and so it has a special meaning to me because it belonged to my grandmother.
I figured it was someone in the local area. I keep saying Terry Redlin. He's from South Dakota. Um, where I'm at right now is literally like 40 miles from I call it the triangle instead of the four corners. It's where North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota
Yep.
meet. And Terry Redlin has, a small museum, whatever town he grew up in South Dakota and that sort of
Yeah, I've
thing.
been there.
Oh, you have been there. Okay. So you've
Yeah,
actually heard of him. Okay. I
yeah,
mean, I have no idea. Like, for
he does
me,
mostly most if I remember right, most of his pieces are waterfowl. And my daughter played college basketball, and she played 3 games in South Dakota. And so my wife and I took a trip, went to Mount Rushmore, went all the way, basically hit all 4 corners of South Dakota, and that was one of the places we stopped.
yeah, I just remember, obviously growing up in Lakes Country, Minnesota, because even though I was in Fargo, grew up in Minnesota basically, every ice shanty and every lake home had a Terry Redlin of some kind. And he had some kind of 13 or some numerology. You knew it was a Terry Redlin because there was 13 birds, or there
No.
was 13 northerns on the ice, on the ice fishers, whatever you want to call it. What do you call it? The stringer. Man, it's been a while since I've been ice fishing, I can tell. Anyway, getting back to the oil and gas world. It's going to be an interesting year with gas prices. Obviously, I've got some things that I'm doing with the Route 66 Centennial. Going to be driving that 13 miles across Kansas. But one of the things that we're going to be educating people on is how Route 66, in combination with the internal combustion engine, basically, oil and gas through vehicles, really grew the middle class.
Mhm.
And it allowed the freedom like this country's never seen before, to where so much of our Americana today is because of Route 66. I mean, Phillips 66 has their name because they got a car to go 66 miles an hour under safety on Route 66. And so there's so many cool things that come from that. Warren, how do you see connecting to that next level? Like for me, with what we do at the Crude Life, I see classic cars and connecting with the freedom that anybody. Okay, just quick sidebar here. I've interviewed over a dozen EV car users. Okay, owners. Sorry, owners up here in my neck of the woods. Every single one of them has returned it within a year. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And so there's a really valuable opportunity right now to really connect personal freedom, family freedom, and just, quality of life with the internal combustion engine. The word ICE has been ruined now, but the internal combustion engine. And when I look at what the interstate system and all these things bring, that's how I look at connecting. How about you, Warren? How do you see connecting in new ways?
Yeah, it depends on the audience that we're talking to, and one of the ways that we connect, especially when we go to schools, um, there's two things that students have a very firm, they think, firm grasp on, and I couple those together. Is I'll ask them, why do we want oil? I'll show them some oil, and we'll talk about where it comes from and all that stuff, and then I'll ask them when we get up to the ground, why do we want to? Why do we want it? And of course, the number one answer is gasoline. And so one of the ways that I connect with them, I'll say, well, do you realize that we never started drilling for oil for gasoline? In fact, at the point in time we started drilling for oil, we had no idea what to do with the gasoline. Most of the gasoline was just siphoned off and sent down a riverbed, so it would evaporate into the atmosphere because we are so volatile, we had no idea what to do with it. Gasoline wasn't important until the automobile came along, and all of a sudden now gasoline had a usage. The reason we started drilling for oil was we started drilling for oil for kerosene. That was the number one product that we were trying to get out of oil, is we were trying to get kerosene. And then I asked them, you know what kerosene was used for? And they're like, yeah, those old lamps that you use. Exactly. In fact, oil and natural gas, and going after oil and natural gas, that is the only reason that we have the whale population that we currently have on this earth. That is what saved the whales, which is a second point that students know, is that you can serve wildlife and you save the whales. And it was oil and natural gas that led to the whales being able to survive and not being pushed to extinction, because whale blubber and whale fat, and especially whale brains, was replaced as a lighting oil by kerosene that came from petroleum. And in making those little connections, I'm able to jump in and say, that's not the only way that oil and natural gas has improved our lives. And then we're able to jump into other things. But it really just depends on the audience that I'm talking to. I try and find something that is meaningful to them, something I know that they've been taught, and then try to basically break the frame on that and look at it from a different perspective. How does that really relate to your life today?
The save the whales thing is something I've never understood, why that hasn't either connected more, or how there hasn't been an attempt to connect that more. That is one of the more remarkable paradigm shifts that human history should teach more and more of, really. And maybe this is one of the complaints that get into like education and syllabuses and that sort of thing, but that's not a small thing, Warren.
No.
Like the oil and gas industry saved the whales, and I would even argue that it possibly saved the walruses and seals too, because after the whales would have been gone, the walruses and seals would have been used next, because they already were in family situations. The whale was just the big, it was the easy pickings. But whale blubber and seal blubber, that burns too. It's just on, I'm sure it was on a smaller regional scale, and it wasn't as popular. Anyway, my point is that that's something that really should be utilize more. How do the kids respond to that? Do they believe you, or do they kind of shrug it off?
No, they absolutely are intrigued by it. They're intrigued by it, and I challenge them to go look it up. I challenge them, but I think the key there is having an honest conversation.
Yeah.
And so we go two different ways on that. One, if you notice that the first part is something that probably most people in the oil industry don't want me to say, is that we just flowed the gasoline down a riverbed because we had no idea what to do with it. And that's exactly what we did in the beginning. And I don't hide from that. I think that that's been a problem with any political conversation that you're having. And we're not political, we're educational. And part of being educational is we just share the facts. That's what we did. And now look how far we've come in protecting the environment to where we are today. Look how much we've changed. And that's a good thing, too. There's a lesson in that as well. And I think that that is part of it as far as your audience really grasping onto what you're saying is that you're not preaching propaganda that we're everything we've ever done is great because we've done some things that were not good. But let's talk about what we did that was good. Let's talk about how it improved human lives. Let's acknowledge the things that we did that were not good. And let's talk about how we've changed. Let's talk about how we don't do that way anymore. We've improved upon it to where we're able to utilize this resource in the most environmentally efficient way possible today, because both of those should be things that our industry is proud of.
I want to say I either read this or heard it late night when I fell asleep watching a conspiracy video. I'm not sure, but one of the ways that they identified where oil was in some of the Middle Eastern and Roman and some of those European and that sort of thing, some of the older world was because they had trenches basically that they would just light on fire because that's where they would put the kerosene. And you know, you talk about putting it down the river. Well, that's
Mhm.
how they used to light cities at night, was just trenches of these of kerosene basically, and they'd light it up. That, I think that's how they discovered some oil at some point, was they would look for basically infrastructure that had that type of lighting system. Then they knew there was a supply nearby. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, or like I said, I could have been falling asleep to some conspiracy video because that sounds made up in my head.
Well, I'm not familiar with that, but I am
Okay.
familiar with there's a lot of places where there are natural seeps. I mean, oil, we've utilized a lot of the shallow oil around the world, but back in ancient history, there was many places where oil would naturally seep to the surface
Hmm.
of the ground, and if oil does, so does natural gas would naturally seep up. In fact, Herodotus talked about way back in the BC area, how BC era, how they would utilize oil, basically tar, because it came up really
Hmm.
thick, and they utilize it as tar and as mortar to build walls and those types of things around buildings. And so there are a lot of places where there is natural seep. Those, of course, are the first places that we looked for oil when we found a use for it. But even today, there's natural seeps that occur in the ocean. It's estimated approximately 1 million barrels of oil a day naturally seep up from the ocean bed. When you're walking along the beach and you see a lump of tar looking stuff on the beach, a lot of people think that that came from a ship or something like that. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, that's natural oil that seeped up from the bottom of the ocean that found its way to the shoreline. In fact, there's an entire bacteria that lives on the bottom of the ocean that feeds on nothing but crude oil that is naturally seeping up from the bottom of the sea floor. So it's a natural part of our life that we utilize, and those are some of the things we also talk to kids about, because the whole keep it in the ground thing is the idea that if we don't keep it in the ground, I mean, if we keep it in the ground, it'll never come up and impact the environment, but it's naturally seeping up every single day in some parts of the earth. And as the plates shift, as tectonics takes its toll, as earthquakes happen, more and more of it continues to seep higher and higher towards Earth's surface.
Who do you connect with the most, do you think? Do the kids connect? Do you think that the college kids are connecting? The random people at a state fair? Is there, I mean, we live in a world of identity politics, and here I am asking you to group together somebody who's the
That's an
most,
easy question.
yeah.
That's an easy one. That's an easy one. The ones that are most intrigued and most interested are your middle school students. Your middle school students are old enough to have a conversation about oil and gas and understand the terms and what you're talking about. They're still young enough that most of them have not developed concrete ideas of their world vision. And so they're open to having a conversation. Get up into high school and especially college, most of those kids have already developed their worldview. And it's a pretty, it's really hard to crack that code because you remember being a teenager, and when you were right, and everybody else was wrong. Even if you were the only one that believed what you believed, you were still right. And so that's kind of hard. So middle school students, they are the ones that are really at that prime spot where they can understand the conversation, but they haven't already made up their mind on what they believe about that conversation. And so that's my favorite place to go. It's middle school students.
What you got on tap next? What's the schedule look like the next few months?
Well, as soon as we get off of this, I'm actually going to the Senior Citizens Potluck in El Dorado, Kansas. They do a monthly potluck and have about 100 seniors that show up out there. Going to talk to them. Very much different than the middle school students, but we're going to talk a lot about oil and gas history here in the state. And so when I talk with older people like that, most of them are lifelong Kansans that have lived here or have lived here for at least decades. So I try and relate back to their early years and what they saw happening in their life, putting it into a historical perspective of how we got from there to here, and then where we're going to go in the future. And so that's my approach with older people, is really emphasizing on the historical part of it. Then I got going to Chanute, going to high school, actually going to high school tomorrow and doing presentations all afternoon tomorrow at a high school. And then it just keeps going. I think I'm only in the office a maximum of 2 days a week of any week in the next month. And because the rest of the time we're out on the road and we're doing presentations, ages all the way from third grade all the way up to senior citizen. And it's a really exciting time here. And in the middle of that, the 2 days I'm in the office, we're going to be finalizing this campaign so we can get it launched hopefully by the end of the month.
What kind of food do they have at the potluck? Are you bringing something?
Well, honestly, I never eat when I go to speak somewhere. And I've just found that opens a door for way too many potential problems. I generally eat before I go, or I wait until after I leave, where I can sit down and relax and I'm not, trying to cram something down that may not sit with me the way that should. So I generally don't eat there, but I understand that it is a tremendous event that they have every single month, and they scheduled me months ago to come and speak to this group.
Up here, they've got, a lot of casseroles. Everything up in my neck of the woods, it has cream and sour cream in it and cheese, potatoes. That's how people cook up here. So, lot of Lutheran basement potlucks up here, too. So, anyway, that's right. Garrison Keeler made a whole career out of it. There's another name from my neck of the woods up there. Well, just taking a look at the clock here as we kind of wind her down. Anything that we left out that you want to make sure that from an educational awareness standpoint, either you got coming up or people should probably know about?
Yeah, we got two things coming up. They're both the same thing in different places. We talked last year about our oil field workers celebrations that we do. These are great opportunities to really bring education into our own industry, helping our industry be more effective in communicating what we do, how we do it, and why it's important to you. We invite in rig hands. We invite in people who are working in the office. We invite in truck drivers and crude haulers. And we invite in all of these, anyone at all who's working in the oil and gas industry, provide them free drinks, free meal. We're going to give away over $4,000 in raffle items at both of these events. So that's $8,000 in raffle items total in these first two here in the spring. We got the first one coming up April 10th in Great Bend, Kansas. And we're inviting everybody in that region to come out for that event. And then we got the next one that is happening. I should have looked at the date before this. I believe it's May the 4th. It's a Thursday. And it's in conjunction with the Eastern Kansas Oil and Gas Association mid-year conference. They'll have their mid-year conference, and they'll end that about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then 5:30 in the evening, we'll start up our oil field celebration and invite everybody else to come in for that final event. But these are great events. We average about 150 people attending each one of them. Every one of them are oil field workers that are out there. And the one thing that we hear after every single event is from the people who didn't show up. Those are the ones we hear from because they contact us and say, when are you going to do that again? Because I heard I should have been there. And so I'm going to give you the advice now. If you're in the area of Great Bend or you're in the area of Chanute, then you should be there. Follow us on social media, follow our website, sign up for our emails, and you'll get all the details to show up for our oil field workers celebrations.
Now, you mentioned the first one was Great Bend, and the second one, the first Thursday of May. What city was that?
Chanute.
Chanute. Okay, there we go. All right, Warren, I know you got to get running. I do too. So thank you for the time today, my good sir. And Kansas Strong, Warren Martin.